What's good, my good people? Welcome to the People's Basics. I'm John Munitz. Today is February 22nd, and today on the program, we are here once again to be doing a policy breakdown of the New York City race. So last week, we got to go through with all of you and have a breakdown of some of the more minor candidates, as well as our own Andrew Yang. We went and did an extensive breakdown, but it's time that we actually treat the competition seriously. And so we're here today to be able to do a breakdown of two of the other candidates in the field. We're going to be going through Eric Adams as well as Scott Stringer. So without further ado, I want to get into today's content, but I want to remind all of you to make sure you go out and share today's content so that more people hear about these candidates in the race. Make sure you hit those like buttons, and we're going to be taking your questions throughout. I'm going to be checking them after each policy breakdown we do. So keep on chatting in the comments below during our live stream so that I can chat with you all during the stream and answer any of your questions. But let me go now into the stream and make sure you get those shares out so that more people can participate and ask their questions too. So the first candidate we're going to be going through, Scott Stringer. He is the current comptroller of New York City. And so the first thing I want to go through on his page is we're going to go through his experience. So first, his whole shtick, he basically wants to say is that, hey, I got the political experience. I'm ready to do the job from the get-go. I have gone up the ranks, and I'm here today to say, hey, we're in crisis, and it's time to go now. So let's go with what he says here. So, exactly, a lifetime of experience uniquely prepares him. Like, yeah. He says, as city comptroller, he exposed waste and mismanagement in every city agency and oversaw growth in the city's 240 billion pension funds, the fourth largest in the nation to record levels. He took on the private prison industry and the world's largest fossil fuel companies, advancing the cause of climate change and decarceration. Would love to know specifics, words. He forced corporations across America to diversify their boardrooms. I'm not necessarily sure that's has to be a good thing. Usually it's voted on by shareholders. So like you want to have whoever you think is best going to manage it regardless. And usually it's just whoever owns the most shares in the company often becomes the board member. So I don't know if that's necessarily like a good regulation to actually be adding. Let's keep going. His plans for comprehensive city-run childcare program would make New York the national leader. That would be good. Let's see. And over the last year, every step of the way, he pushed Bill de Blasio to fix the city's response to COVID-19. Okay, give me the generics. Let me keep going. But long before that, he was a chief financial officer. He was a kid in Washington Heights. Okay. Began his career in public service as an aide to the Assemblyman Jerry Nadler. How I wish we could have had Jonathan Herzog take down Nadler this term. So that's not a bonus points for me. He was elected to the state assembly in 1992, where he made waves fighting against George Pataki's tax cuts for the wealthy and standing up to leaders of his own party to protect tenants' rights. That would be good. Scott was arrested protesting the police murder of Amadou Diallo, passed a landmark anti-stalking law to protect victims of domestic violence, was an original co-sponsor of marriage equality legislation, and led a group of insurgent legislators to pass the first rules reforms in Albany in a generation. All of that sounds good. I would love to know what those rules reforms are, but I like that part. Let's keep going. He becomes Manhattan Borough President. Scott reformed the community board appointment process and supported community-based planning to put neighborhood needs ahead of developer profits. He created school overcrowding war rooms and forced the Department of Education to build new schools. Okay. He helped launch the campaign against fracking in New York State, worked to reduce food insecurity and asthma rates in East Harlem, fought for more protected bike lanes and stronger traffic enforcement, and was an early and outspoken critic of the NYPD's use of stop and frisk. That's all good. I praise Scott for that. Those are all good things there. Elected city comptroller in 2013 after an upset victory over former Governor Eliot Spitzer. Scott has overseen growth in New York City's pension funds from $147 billion to $240 billion. He overhauled the back office of the pension funds, instituted new ethics, risk management, and compliance practices, banned placement agents, and aligned fees paid to investment advisors with their performance on behalf of city workers and retirees. Okay, let's keep going. So then under his comptrollership, he audited every city agency, saving millions of taxpayer dollars and improving city services. His investigations have exposed unsafe and deplorable conditions at homeless shelters and public housing, forcing much needed improvements. His creation of ClaimStat, a tool to transparently analyze claims against the city and encouraged agencies to improve their practices, has already saved taxpayers tens of millions of dollars, and he has been a consistent voice for responsible budgeting and long-term planning, calling for more savings from City Hall to better prepare for fiscal downturns. So, like, the whole angle, it does seem like what Scott wants to go on is that he does have significant experience. He is trying to frame himself in a very progressive light. In his work, he has clearly shown some of that. But I don't think he is he's not like going for that like Bernie radical wing kind of more progressive revolutionary. He's kind of going more for like a reformist, like Elizabeth Warren type style of an approach. And I know he has actually formally endorsed Elizabeth Warren. And that's kind of the similar lane like someone like Gerald Nadler was in as well, who has also, I think, received the endorsement of Elizabeth Warren. So he is really kind of that type of a politician in his approach. He tries to be like somewhat like fiscally responsible. He's not a socialist by say, but he wants to try and do these human advocacy causes. Sometimes that might come with some of a little bit of a regulatory burden. Sometimes it's like you're not going necessarily far enough to be addressing these issues. So we'll see more when we get into his plans, what he specifically wants to do. But this seems like someone who is focused on just, improving the existing system. He doesn't want to maybe potentially do huge changes, but he does want to move us potentially in the right direction in many categories. So let's read this last blurb for him. At the same time, Scott led New York City's pension funds to make the historic decision to divest $4 billion from the fossil fuel industry. Scott was called one of the strongest voices for climate action in the financial sector by Bill McKibben, a founder of the climate advocacy group 350.org, and a leader of fossil fuel divestment efforts. And he has used the power of the pension funds to diversify boardrooms across America and strengthen corporate governance at Fortune 500 companies. Building on his decades of activism against systematic racism in the criminal justice system, Scott also led the pension funds to divest from the private prison industry. He has published detailed plans to end the criminalization of poverty, reinvest police dollars in communities, and transform the city's approach to public safety, and was the first citywide official to call for the closure of the jail on Rikers Island. Scott has brought his commitment to tenants' rights and affordable housing to the Comptroller's office, opposing rezonings that would increase the displacement pressures on longtime residents, and auditing NYCHA more times than all previous Comptrollers combined. He has put out detailed plans to create a land bank and use vacant lots to create permanently affordable housing, refocus the city's investments on low-income housing, and require affordability in every development. I look forward to reading that plan. It sounds like a good plan. A leader in the fight for diversity and inclusion throughout city agencies and in city contracts, Scott grades every city agency every year on their work with minority and women-owned businesses. He increased the share of minority and women-owned businesses spending in the Comptroller's office from 13% to 50%. And after years of advocacy in 2020, City Hall heeded Scott's call for chief diversity officers at every agency. Scott and his wife, Elise Baxbaum, live in Manhattan and are the proud parents of Max and Miles, who are students at PS 33. Like so many New Yorkers and with great advantages than most, they have faced the challenges of the pandemic firsthand. The Stringer family tragically lost Scott's mom, Arlene, to the coronavirus in April 2020. And today, in their two-bedroom apartment, Scott and Elise continue to juggle 2 jobs and 2 kids' schooling. Scott Stringer, and he gets you right into his plans. I have to say, Scott, it's a good page. I'm going to give you that credit. He is definitely a progressive individual, like in his record and his approach. There might be small differences in style, but I think he has a solid agenda so far from what I've heard, other than, as I said, maybe a little bit more regulatory than I'd like in certain areas. Let's go to the plans, though. So, plans to rebuild. Before we hop in, let me see if there are any questions so far on what we've had here. Yeah, I wanted to bring this up. Like, so far from what I've seen, because I've read through this beforehand, Scott is kind of in that same range for me. Like, I think actually it could be helpful, bias disclosure to everyone of like where I really come up front with like my ballot for the top 5. So I've endorsed Andrew Yang. He is my number 1 pick on the ballot right now. I have been thinking right now with my second pick, it's going to either be, there's like a 2 through 4 range, which is really kind of up in the air right now. But if I was like forced to be picking today, it's probably going to be someone like Scott. I think he can be a good candidate in this area. It's him, and then probably Catherine Garcia at 3 right now, and then Diane Morales at 4. And then I might be putting someone like, at that point, when you have your 5 picks, like I know some people want to like just like share the love and get someone's name onto the ballot. But like the 5 picks are like the last ditch. Like this is the problem with ranked choice voting, why I like Star a little bit better. When you have ranked choice, you want to use it almost as like a defense against the candidates you don't want the most. And so I'd say of like the main contending candidates, like probably Adams is the one that I'm not wanting as much. And so I think to play proper defense, since I already have Stringer on my ballot, I probably should be putting something like Maya Wiley at my 5 spot. Like, just because I think she has a higher likelihood to potentially advance. So that's kind of where my mind is at right now in terms of the ballot. But there's plenty of time left in the season to be addressed. Why? Why does he look afraid? I don't know. Sometimes it's just the face. We all make first impressions. We're very visual creatures, but that's your judgment. I don't know. He looks like just a dude to me. But you know what? Let's keep going. Because I like a lot of what Scott has, because I do think he actually does have a lot of good experience, and I think he actually has a lot of solid policy here. So let me go through on some of the stuff that he has. So we're now on his plans page. So, he says he has a big agenda for City Hall to rebuild the city and the economy for all New Yorkers stronger and fairer than ever before. He'll strengthen public health infrastructure to get New Yorkers vaccinated and safely to the other side of the pandemic, and then overhaul it to prepare for the next crisis. He'll bring our economy back with a focus on supporting small businesses, putting New Yorkers back to work, and training them for the jobs of tomorrow. He'll take a new, more comprehensive approach to ensure public safety and invest in all of our neighborhoods. He'll enact sweeping plans to take climate change and our housing affordability crisis and dramatically improve transportation throughout the 5 boroughs. And he'll secure our future with a sweeping plan to invest in our children's ages 0 to 10 by making high-quality childcare affordable to every family in the city and putting more resources into the classroom to get our kids caught up after the pandemic and provide across-the-board enrichment for years to come. Scott knows what it takes to make change in government. That change is people's lives. It's what he's done his entire career, and he knows it's not enough to have big ideas. That's why he has specific, actionable plans that are ready to go on day one. That's kind of the ringing theme that Scott's really trying to bring here. He is the guy with experience. He is a progressive, but he's not going to be like super bold, in my opinion, because he says, well, I want them to be making sure they're very reasonable. I think he's trying to go with a little bit more of like a moderate progressive approach in his tone, at least. So let's read the specifics. So he has the plans here. Let's go into children and education. This is a smart layout. Just like to show people in terms of like, this is something to consider too. I like to analyze pages and how people try to present themselves on their pages, because for any of the people out there who want to get politically involved and run themselves, they should know what are good pages that people can clearly understand and get stuff away quickly from reading it, and what aren't. We got to show you some of the lesser candidates from before at the beginning of last week, and some of their pages were classic examples of things that you don't want to do. Scott's is a very polished plan. So he really kind of puts up front like, hey, let's remind you again, we've done stuff here. And then he goes into the plan. So we're not going to go through again the done stuff here thing, because we've already read enough about your background. I'm hungry for some plans now. Let's dive into some real detail. So he says Scott's has been a champion of public education in New York City throughout his entire career. He also knows the issues firsthand as the father of 2 children in city elementary schools, the proud son of a late city school teacher, and the product of city schools in CUNY himself. For Scott, standing up for New York City's children is part of his DNA, and across his 30-year career in advance a broad vision to raise educational outcomes at every level, confront inequities head-on, and invest in pathways to success for every child from the cradle to their career. He wants to provide high-quality, affordable early childhood education for all infants and toddlers. He wants to dramatically increase child care assistance to working families with children under 3 and expand eligibility requirements to serve families making up to $100,000 per year. Okay, I mean, yeah, we should be increasing the age. I don't know why we have to well, I mean, this is, again, I guess it's a local economy. This is like one of the things that you always have to come back to. It's like universal programs are a lot easier to administer when you have, frankly, more flexibility in the purse. It's a great federal thing, but when you have a little bit more of a localized economy, it becomes a little bit more difficult to be able to do. This actually provides a little bit less risk from volatility of population size. If you do it universal, you have a little bit more concern there. So this gives some eligibility requirements. So it's a good thing. Expand that. Triple the number of infants and toddlers in city-backed care and sharply reduce child care costs for many of 70,000 working families. Okay, sure. I don't know if that's the way I'd want to phrase that necessarily. Is the goal to get them in city-backed care, or is it to just get them into care programs that they can just have? I think it's just not very clearly worded what he is exactly trying to do with that. Let's keep going. Invest $500 million over 5 years to address child care deserts by building and repairing child care facilities across the city. Yeah, this is the thing. This is actually why universal child care, we'll have an episode on this in the future when we do child care development, and it'll be an episode we have with Marianne Williamson as our guest. It's kind of a very difficult thing to do childcare, especially in more rural areas. And in this case, just areas where they're not existing right now. New York City, this can be more easily fixed. And so this is something that is a very useful proposal, is building into these existing areas of high density that just are lacking these care facilities or have already broken down facilities. Repairing those is a good investment so that you can actually start providing service and it can be used enough so that it's a worthwhile thing, because you have enough parents and enough kids to potentially get use of it. But rural areas, you have that struggle where it's there's so much space in between. It's is having a universal childcare facility really the best approach? I think some of the way you have to try and get more childcare out there is just kind of an expansion of the education process and after school programs. Because you're not going to have everyone be close enough by one central place to get a really useful childcare facility, potentially in some rural areas. So you have to be a little bit more flexible. That's why things like potentially a child UBI is a useful thing. UBI in general is useful. I think in general, we should be having parents who consider spending more time at home when they're having really young kids, being able to help their kids. And then we have the preschool that's going to help them at least during the day. And we can have school be in a process where it can align with basically the parents' work schedules of most parents. That way you have less demand for childcare from outside school sources. I think there's a lot of creative ways we can kind of get into this. And so investing 500 million, making this a priority, great idea. We need to be making sure that we invest in people, especially when they're young. That usually has the highest impact because the investment starts the earliest. That's usually the rule of thumb with all forms of investment. The sooner you start, the longer it is going to pay dividends over time. So let's keep going. Support early childhood educators by meaningfully investing in training, professional development, scholarships, and increased compensation for the workforce. Again, this is another important thing. It's like you have to make sure you also have the supply of people to actually administrate it. It doesn't matter if you have the building if you have no one to actually fulfill the jobs. And so you need quality jobs, you need the proper training to help these kids. These are things that need to be invested in as well. So I love to see that. Let's keep going. So he wants to invest in great classroom instruction through teacher mentorship and professional development. He wants to launch the largest teacher residency program in the country to prepare teachers for the profession and reduce turnover. That's a lovely idea. I like that. Recruit 1,000 aspiring teachers each year to work in the classroom alongside an accomplished mentor teacher with an emphasis on recruiting young teachers of color. Yeah, this is something that actually has had a lot of studies on it. When it comes to education, especially, a lot of people do actually gain benefit from having representation in the classroom from teachers. And so a lot of communities of color are not getting their own form of representation in their classrooms. And so we do need to help out in that regard because there has been actual plenties of studies on this that show that attrition from education is just there's not as much relatability to the teacher. There's not that same bond potentially. I'm not saying that it's not possible. I'm sure there are plenty of great situations, but this is something that has been studied and has shown tons of efficacy. And there's a reason why many of the candidates are trying to propose such a thing. Even Yang is trying to get that same approach in there. So I fully support the idea of trying to get more recruitment effort on that for our education system. We should be providing stipends for resident teachers to cover living expenses during the year of residency, allowing them to focus on their training without debt or a second job. Yeah, allow teachers to help them focus on the actual job. They shouldn't be having to work second jobs and not being focused on developing lesson plans and grading their students' work and actually being able to live a life. Like teachers deserve a life too. So yeah, I think that is a great thing to also be able to do as well. And then he wants to leverage and collaborate with the city's excellent teacher preparation programs, including those at CUNY and SUNY. Okay, so then he wants to go integrate our schools and confront inequities across the system. He wants to support and fund district-wide plans to increase diversity, building on the success of efforts in District 15 in Brooklyn and District 3 in Manhattan. Okay, I'm not exactly sure what happened there, but okay, he wants to increase diversity. Good. Make the DOE's recent decision to end geographic screens at the high school level permanent and scale back or eliminate academic screens at the middle school level. Okay. So he wants to stop the use of the SHSAT as a standardized test to determine admissions to the city's specialized high schools and base eligibility instead of the state math and reading scores. So, okay, so it's full elimination. It's not just like adding additional factors. Okay, so while exploring the potential of apportioning a percentage of seats to the top performers in each. Okay, so it's not So it's just not using it as a holistic measurement, but it's like an automatic emission, and then beyond that, you do holistic. And you don't even use that as a factor, I guess, in the holistic. I don't know why you wouldn't just factor it in, like just in any degree. Like, I think standardized tests shouldn't be the only metric, but they are a metric. Um, and so I think you do need to have a better process that factors in more things and honestly gives more weight to the other things. But I don't think it's necessary to completely eliminate the test. In fact, for some students, like that is a form of demonstrating education that is easier for them, and you might disadvantage them. So, like, some people might need to be able to demonstrate their skills through auditory demonstration of knowledge. Some might need to be able to demonstrate it through the use of choosing between options. Different people display education at different levels, and I think that's why there needs to be a more holistic sense of evaluation in education, not complete removal. And there is way too much stress put upon these tests because right now they're given too much weight, but they do show something. And I think certain students deserve to be able to display that form of education obtainment as well. And now you might say, well, you might be getting that similar form from a test in your classroom. But you know what? There's a lot of debate over whether or not you can just trust grades because certain schools, make it a lot easier for their students and have grade inflation compared to others. So sometimes a standardized test to be able to suss out, like, did you just make it too easy for your students to get through these checkpoints? It is useful. So I don't like the idea of complete elimination. Let me keep going, though. He wants to ensure equitable access to gifted and talented programs and stopping testing 4-year-olds. Yeah, like, I get not testing 4-year-olds. Like, I just don't feel like that is the point where kids need to be having these like standardized tests. That's just not the point where I think they're prepared for those types of tests. I think you need to be at least getting them past that 3rd grade reading level before you want to administer any of those types of tests. So it's like, I don't know exactly what the tests are because I have not had a child myself and had to get them through a gifted and talented program, nor did I go through the New York City school system myself. So I would have to know what the actual test was, but I could see potentially ending the test for particularly younger kids. Let's see. Increase student access to social workers and other mental health professionals to reduce suspensions and provide direct, integrated, trauma-sensitive support to students experiencing emotional or behavioral crises. This is very important. This is actually very important for a variety of reasons. The one that I want to highlight, though, is that this is a great way for you to detect abuse in households. So, the number one way a lot of the times people find out if a child is being abused by their parents is a lot of times school counselors and teachers potentially noticing something and referring to them to the counselor. So I think having school professionals, mental health professionals that people feel comfortable they can go to and are accessible because they're not overburdened with a ridiculous ratio of students to one professional, I think is going to go a long way for making sure that children are protected. And they need our protection because you know what? Parents do have some authority, but there crosses a line. And we are not going to allow them to abuse children. They deserve to escape into an environment that will not abuse them. And so these are the areas where we detect that. And I do worry, frankly, with the whole pandemic, how many cases are being left undetected because parents are simply left at home with their kids and it's completely mobile learning. It's a really depressing thought. I have not dug into the data on this, but I know from having dug into the data on detection of these things and how important these mental health professionals are for that process, that is definitely something that can be occurring during a time of isolation and mobile education. So let me keep going on, because that's a great part of Scott's program, to make sure that we have enough professionals, enough social workers in each of these schools. He wants to guarantee that every child has access to free, high-speed internet service at home, and establishes a true one-to-one device policy. Wonderful policy, Scott. Wonderful policy. Yeah, how do you ensure that we have equitable education right now if you say you can't have your kids in the schools and you're losing all these social services, and then you say in certain areas of the city there's no, internet access? You're going to have people having to go to their freaking McDonald's and Starbucks to get internet, and you're having not even the information access of having libraries equitably distributed across the area. So yeah, we need to be making sure that we expand broadband. I believe it was something like 12% of the area is currently not being covered by broadband services. I believe that was the statistic we had read the other day. But yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And it goes further. It doesn't help if you don't have a device to be able to use either, to be able to go to mobile education. So, this is something why, frankly, some charter schools end up beating public schools, is because they just deliver a higher quality education model where they do certain things like this and provide every one of their students these devices. I'm not saying every charter school is at that quality, but certain schools do reach that level. And that's why it ends up stripping some of the funding from these current schools, because if we're not doing a good job, other private entities are going to try and do a better job. And are we going to really deny kids from getting the best education? If parents want to go pay for a better education for their kids because they feel like we're failing their school systems by not investing, that's on us as a public system for not investing properly and not preparing our teachers in the best way to educate children, where each child actually has the device to be able to access their lessons at least. And then finally, Scott's last proposal: make sure every child receives high quality arts, physical, and health education, a requirement of state law that goes unmet by the city. Sure. I think some of that, it depends on like how long. I think some of that, like in the high school process, should be a little bit more optional for certain people. Like, for instance, I will say, as a former high school athlete, it became a little burdensome when we had many workouts, and then we would have on top of that health education, and then we'd have on top of that we'd have a form of working out through gym class. I'm not saying I didn't have fun sometimes, but it became a little bit burdensome, and sometimes I would have liked to have chosen just to have free time instead, or to have chosen another course, frankly. There was definitely other courses I wanted to have taken in that process that I couldn't, because I always had to have gym as a requirement. So I think for sure for younger kids, definitely. But I think maybe there's some flexibility in that process. And likewise, art isn't for everyone. And so it's like, I think these things are expansions, and that's good. But I don't like the idea to make sure that these things are like always mandatory for every form of a kid. It depends on how you qualify kid, I guess. He says child, so I'd imagine that's like until they're 17. So I think there should be a little bit more flexibility in our high schools. Let's keep going. Last part here: prepare New Yorkers for the jobs of tomorrow. He wants to make CUNY community colleges free for all and revamp workforce development programs to build back a more equitable and inclusive economy. Organize paid internships for all CUNY graduating seniors to help them bridge the gap between college and career. Dramatically increase investment in career and technical education, early college programs, and college now in DOE education, Department of Education schools. Strength partnerships with private industry to upscale New Yorkers, improve career paths and expand apprenticeship programs, and expand bridge programs that help connect language education to job training and opportunities. Those are all very reasonable proposals. I think this is a very actually bold proposal. The first one, making community colleges completely free. I think it's a good idea. And I think just the idea of just trying to help provide a little bit more connection with career and technical education is great, because one of the things that is so true is that a lot of people, when they're in college, one of the problems that they face is they don't get great work experience or internship experience during the breaks. like during winter breaks or summer breaks. And those are pivotal when you are trying to apply into the job market because, well, I don't know about you. The last time you've had to apply for a job, I've been doing them a lot lately, but uh, you can be given out entry level jobs that still require 3 to 5 years of experience. And you ask yourself, how the hell do you do this? And so they're kind of expecting you to basically give away free labor to the frickin' economy through internships during your college experience, which is kind of a jip. Like when college is so expensive itself, like so much of this is through like, oh, hey, don't worry, we're going to give you college credits. No, it's like we need money now. Like we still have living expenses. Like so like I'm telling you, like making it a free process and getting people connected to these job programs earlier so they have, some experience guaranteed. That is just so pivotal to actually having people prepared for the workforce because it's great to have an education, but boy, the people value job experience way more. I will tell you that from having to do a lot of HR work myself, staffing for projects. We want to know what you've done, what you've actually used your education on more than your education. I will say some people do have a little bit of respect for the pedigree in certain like private schools or just it's like a checkbox for some people like, oh, you got to have a college degree. But yeah, the work experience is so pivotal. A lot of people are willing to look past, frankly, not having a college degree if you have sufficient work experience. And so if we can just get them that, why put so much cost on people to get more and more years of education if we could just simply do education better earlier, making our preschools a reality for everyone, making our primary education system a vastly improved system that is equitable for all students so that people feel prepared after they leave high school to go get their first jobs. And then if they want to go specialize and get more, potentially money from being able to manage a team, from getting more expertise, go for it. Go get a college degree. I just think that it's interesting that we've developed the system of an expectation of everyone needing to go to a system that has a cost of roughly $20,000 in the public system to $50,000. CUNYs are a little bit cheaper; they're the community colleges, but like I think we need to be investing earlier and making our existing systems more efficient first before we try to do college. CUNY is a fine development. I love that. Community college is a fine program for us to be doing. But I don't know about the big universities. Let me keep going, though. Let's go to the next page and let me check in with everyone here. How are the comments going? Nothing I want to put up on screen. Let's go to our next section because I think I don't want to go through each of them in that much detail as we just went through this current one, or we're going to be here forever because we want to go through this as well as Eric Adams. So we're going to go on more high level analysis for the next few here. So climate action. Okay, so his plan, we're going to read the headlines here. He wants to ban all new fossil fuel infrastructure. He wants to create a public utility with 100% renewable energy. He wants to permanently retire all existing pipelines. He wants to double the city solar tax abatement. He wants to unlock the potential of energy storage. All great. He wants to launch the nation's largest green and blue bonds program to fund green and resilient capital investments. Good. We need to have some incentivization on this. Transform Rikers Island into a hub of energy storage. Sure, they're trying to shut down Rikers, so you're going to have new usage. Why not make it into something like this capacity? He wants to fight for the federal and state funding to implement a Green New Deal. I think this is one of the areas where I actually like a candidate like Andrew Yang. This is kind of like one of the reasons why I think he could do a better job is that I think he has the connections to be able to get these necessary federal fundings because when we have such a deficit like we do right now,
we're going to have to get either real creative or we're going to have to ask for some help. And I think we're in the point where we need to do both, and do both successfully if we really want to recover. So yeah, I think that is the first and foremost priority in an administration, is being able to network between state, federal, and being able to work within the existing bodies of the government. So I give Scott credit for his experience of knowing the workers within the existing government system in New York City well, but I question some of those federal and state ties potentially. Maybe he has the federal ties to, like, he has Gerald Nadler as a very close connection that he has. He does have some current good endorsements. I will give him credit for that. Like, he has Jamal Bowman as another one. And I think Adriano Espaillat, I think, is another one who he has as an endorsement. But, you know, that is one thing that I would really like to see. If we're going to do this really Green New Deal, we're going to need the federal funds. And we need the connections to get that done. Okay, let's keep going. He wants to create workforce development programs and apprenticeships to put more New Yorkers to work at tens of thousands of good paying jobs. Yep. We got to give the jobs with these infrastructure programs. And he wants to take on the corporate financiers of the climate destruction. He wants to drastically improve air quality, retire half of all New York City's based peaker plants. Based peaker plants. I want to look that up. Okay, so he wants to eliminate those? Why? Why would you want to retire? Oh, I mean, okay, so they're just fossil fuel based? Okay. Okay, I can see that. Do you want to eliminate the fossil fuel based ones? Sure, that's fine. We're going to need other forms of, I guess, like reliable energy as backup when we have excessive energy demand. So it's like, I think your timeline's okay here, Scott. You have here 2028 and then 2035 for the rest. We probably will have the energy supply built by then, hopefully. 7 years? Yeah, that seems like a reasonable timeline. So yeah, I can get that, but hopefully we can build capacity. I would say it's like, this is more of like a target goal. Like, this should be something flexible based on like certain milestone checkpoints, because you need to have an ability to have enough energy. Like, we've seen the devastation that can occur when people go without needed warmth and needed services, and just basic electricity and utilities. So let's make sure that it is a carefully managed process. Scale back our urban highway network. Fight for the Green New Deal for public housing, outlined by AOC. Eliminate childhood-led exposure. Yep, very important. Decarbonize the city's building stock. Ban natural gas and oil use. Halt the use of polluting number 4 heating oil. Implement fast-track green permitting. Retrofit schools. Develop a plan of district-scale clean energy projects. These are all like, they're totally good programs here. Make open streets permanent. Install fully protected bus lanes. Extend city bike across all 5 cities. Invest in parks and enhance urban forests. Expand green infrastructure. Encourage the electrification of vehicles. Protect all 520 miles of coastline. New strategies to elevate homes and businesses. Address the dangers of heat waves. Yeah, like, I have no complaints with Scott Stringer's plan here on climate change here, like, and addressing our infrastructure as well. Like, it's a very solid plan. Like, I think one of the things that you're going to notice with Scott, he has good plans, he has good experience. It's just whether you think he's going to be the leader to be able to get these things accomplished. And that is a big deal. And I think there's a reason why I have him. As I said before, I currently have Scott at 2. So it goes Yang and then Scott for me. So I'm not trying to like bash him that much. Like, I do this because I care, and that's why we spend all the time on analyzing these people's programs, because we want to show that we actually care to the detail. But yeah, let me keep going. Healthcare and the pandemic. And that's why I'm willing to take like an actual look at each of these. Like the people, I'll tell you, I got my little bias. I'm gonna give the people that I like a little bit better a more thorough showing of the full policy platform in that regard. As I showed you before, the less serious contenders did not get as much time on the actual explanations of these. But let me check in, make sure we got all our comments handled, and we're in a good spot. Make sure for those that are watching, you go out and we share these videos so that we can get more people checking in and seeing these people's policy platforms, and they can check the fact after the math. We are going to be having these always up on our YouTube and our different social media platforms. So we're now on healthcare. So he wants to overhaul our pandemic response and preparedness. He wants to fix the ongoing city response to COVID-19 with a comprehensive and well-managed citywide vaccination program. He wants to, make sure we're prepared for the next one and catch up on routine and preventative care. So not a lot of detail, but it just says create a plan, overhaul how we did this existing pandemic response, and go forward and learn from there. So I think that's really all that we can really take away from this really. So let's see. Next one is fortify our public health infrastructure and expand access to care. So we build out a world-class public health system by strengthening the city's public health leadership and infrastructure, and the infighting and improved coordination between the Department of Health and NYC Health and hospitals, expand access to primary and affordable care, create one standard of care for all New Yorkers, which is good. This is the thing. I like all of these programs here. They're not like he compared to his last plan, which was significantly more detailed on specific programs. These are a lot more goals, and I think these are all wonderful goals. Mental health is a huge important priority, making sure there's standardized care so that we have less disparity between on a racial level and frankly on a gender level as well in terms of care, especially when it comes to pain management is a large part of the disparities there, and making sure there's access to everyone and making sure that less people just die due to medical error. As we covered in our healthcare episode of the People's Basics, we want to make sure that, people aren't dying because they went to the hospital where they could have not died otherwise. So I think that is important to make sure there's standardized care and that you're rebuilding the infrastructure and how you handle the process. Fine priorities, not the level of detail I would like on that one. And I think this is one where you need to go into more specifics. This is the first and foremost priority, frankly, at this moment. Okay, let's go now to housing affordability. And this will teach me to try and do two people at one time. I go so far into depth with these more serious candidates that I'm not going to be able to get through two of them each time. So I'm going to have to back off of Eric Adams today. We're going to say goodbye to him for today. We're going to rename this video, and people will know that we're going to change that going forward. Because this is going to go too long otherwise. So this is housing now. He wants to help renters stay in their homes and small landlords stay solvent. He wants to expand the voucher usability, increase the city's enforcement of housing violations, and re-educate residents on the availability of the voucher system. He wants to expand the right to counsel. Good. Convert vacant hotels and commercial spaces into shelter and supportive housing and affordable housing. He wants to assist small landlords and nonprofit organizations with a new program to provide financial assistance in exchange for restrictive declarations preventing tenant eviction. And he wants to reverse the damage of the Trump administration and fight for real federal relief for tenants and homeowners. Okay. These are all reasonable things to be doing. These are all things that help try to keep people in their houses. This is saying, hey, if you're poor, here's a voucher for you to be able to use to be able to pay for your rent. Here's the right to get counsel to make sure if you're being evicted, you have someone on your side to help, protect you. And it's saying, hey, we need to make sure that there's more supply. Let's get existing hotels converted into shelters. And let's make sure that landlords, because we're going to be making sure that these people can stay in their homes, aren't being pushed over and put in a financial burden because we say, no, you don't have to pay to stay in their place. So yeah, I think that is important. And then the last one, it's so vague. It's like, oh, I'm just gonna, throw in the Trump reference. Like, people know that's the red meat to like a Democrat reading the page. It's like, oh boy, look, we're gonna fight against what Trump did to us. It's not very specific though. Then we go into invest in the NYCHA and new social housing. Build in a new generation of social housing on the more than 2,900 vacant lots already owned by the city, currently unused and undeveloped. Yep. They want to build new supply, preserve existing affordable housing, reform the NYCHA and invest a lot of money in it, establish good permanent jobs and wage and benefit floor standards for the people building this stuff, and wasteful tax giveaways to private developers, create a new operating subsidy program to finance deep affordability, establish a tenant bill of rights, and fight speculation. I love all of those policies. This is all about being able to get more public housing, essentially, out there. Next is making sure that every neighborhood's affordable. It's requiring developers to set aside a certain amount to affordable housing. This way you don't have just like luxury developments being built up everywhere and forcing people out of their neighborhoods. I think that is a reasonable level at 25% as well. Replace developer-driven rezonings. Yeah, you do want to do a more comprehensive zoning approach, because otherwise this is how you get corruption in the system, because then you're going to have developers financing campaigns to persuade people on rezoning stuff. That happens very, very commonly in my hometown. So I know this very well, the importance of doing comprehensive planning. So it's not just one person who wants to build something somewhere. The whole community has input when it comes to a major new development. Let's keep going. Allow tenants to build credit by delivering the option to have rent payments reflected on credit for willing tenants. That's a really cool idea. That's actually a thing that is like, I've not heard that from many of the candidates so far, and it's a very important thing if we're going to have credit as a system that keeps on going. Like, as much as it feels like a scam at times, I don't feel like we're going to end up being able to get rid of it. I think certain powerful institutions really like having the ability to have some level of risk management. So if you're going to do that, help people build credit at least. And so allowing rent to be considered part of credit, that's a good thing to do. Okay, next thing, fighting homelessness with housing and support. Build permanent housing for very and extremely low income families. Okay. I mean, I get it, kind of. I don't know how exactly that's administered. Like, are you going to have like a lottery saying like, showing up to someone's house with a big old check, you got a new home? Or actually not, that's crude of me to say, because you're not showing up to someone's house. These are people who are homeless and in extreme poverty. But like, are you just picking someone off the street? Like, I just don't know how you're doing that picking of like, here's a new permanent home. And it's like, for all the people who are buying homes, it's like, is that like, I don't know. I would need to know more about this plan, Scott. I want to know what you're thinking. Not enough detail for me to fully understand what you'll do there in giving someone just a full home. And like, what are those income levels? Like, if I was like, I don't know, making $30,000 and I hear this new program's coming, do I want to just leave my job and hope to get one of my free homes? I don't know. I need to hear way more on that one. Let's see. Next one. Address the intersection of domestic violence and homelessness. Yeah, this is huge reason why a lot of people don't feel comfortable in the shelters right now is that a lot of, frankly, violence occurs because of some of the populations that more likely end up homeless tend to be people who have some mental health problems at times and are in more, potentially desperate need in occasion. So that scarcity mindset does not lead to the most rational decisions and often leads to violence. So that leads to a lot of people not being willing to even go in the shelters that we build, which leads to homeless populations just ending up on the street instead. So we have to make sure that the shelters are properly being managed. Next, we have to increase, or next he says we have to increase the availability of stabilization beds and safe haven beds. These are like kind of like in between places. He wants to prioritize housing first model with supportive housing. He wants to end agency silos regarding social services and homelessness. He wants to set aside 15% of all city-funded units to house the formerly homeless. And he wants to expand loans to help homeowners fight speculation by giving tenants an opportunity to purchase TOPA and target affordable housing dollars to help tenants who purchase their buildings create new social housing. He wants to replace the mortgage recording tax with a progressive real property transfer tax. And he wants to allow homeowners to build accessory dwelling units. So in these things, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is that, I think he has a relatively good plan. There are certain areas here I'd like a little bit more details on. But I think like one of the things Scott has shown me in each of these plans so far is that I think he has a very good priorities. He has the right experience. It's just whether he is going to be the right person for the leadership job. And I feel in this moment it's going to be Yang. But there's a reason why, again, I'm telling you all, I keep saying this, Scott's my number 2 right now on my ballot. And I think he is a very solid person, despite him having kind of, he is considered one of the more establishment candidates in this race because he does have experience. Like sometimes establishment just means experience. But he's been able to deliver some results. And so I think he is a pretty solid person. The last thing I want to cover here, I guess, is I want to look more on just the public safety part. I think jobs in the economy, there's going to be certain supports for small businesses. I think we're going to see the same thing. I think public safety and justice is going to be a more potentially polarizing, that you're going to find more difference between the candidates. One of the people we were looking to cover in this video today was supposed to be Eric Adams, but this is going just a bit too long for me wanting to cover both. But this might be one of the things that kind of like separates the candidates is how they handle criminal justice reform. So we're going to go into Scott's platform there. So he wants to strengthen and reinvest in communities. He wants to move responsibilities that shouldn't be handled by the police to train professionals. He wants to invest in programs and initiatives from housing and education to overdose prevention and employment programs that strengthen communities and get at the root causes of violence. He wants to keep public spaces safe, vibrant, and active with targeted investments in plazas, playgrounds, vacant lots, lighting, and other community spaces to increase foot traffic and promote safety. He wants to redesign our first response system so that a gun and a badge isn't the answer to non-criminal calls. And he wants to end the school to prison pipeline and continue efforts to remove the NYPD from city schools. And he wants to protect the First Amendment right of New Yorkers and stop deploying the militarized units at protests, marches, demonstrations, or parades. I like that. I like that last part too. Like, I have not heard a lot of the candidates just talking up for the right to protest in general. Like, we had a ton of protests in the New York City area. Got to go to some myself. And I will say, they were much more chaotic and the cops were much more out of control than the ones that I had attended when I was in New Jersey. And we are supposed to have that right as Americans to free speech. That includes the right to assemble and being able to display our, need for resolve from our government officials and public officials in general. And if people are not committing crime of breaking anything, then police need to at least respect that will for people to be able to gather and protest. It shouldn't constantly have to be a petitioned affair for people to gather and protest without us having the right to not be, tear gassed and beaten. So I respect him actually calling that out, because I think the first and foremost thing is, why are they always there? Like, I get you maybe wanting to protect some businesses occasionally, like you on your normal patrol, but like, it seems like they just always send the full force whenever people are just protesting. Like, maybe you want to like check in with the officials at the state level and say like, hey, is this something that's needed? And in his administration, he's going to be with probably some of these protesters on occasion demanding justice. So I think that is like something that's very important, is you have someone who is going to be, listening to the people first before saying, okay, is this legitimately a cause that we need to get people the whole force here? Because right now it seems like it's an automatic deployment regardless. And a lot of the circumstances have not warranted that. Let's keep going. Stop the climb of shootings and violence in our communities and ensure safe streets. He wants to address concentrations of serious crime by strengthening detective work and increasing clearance rates, which evidence shows reduces crime. He wants to stem the flow of guns into the city from out of state using gun trace data and working in partnership with state and federal authorities. He wants to invest in and expand proven programs that interrupt violence and cycles of redistribution, such as Cure Violence. He wants to take a multi-agency approach to preventing violence, and he wants to expand neighborhood stat. I love it. I think the number one thing that is the responsibility of law enforcement is stopping violence and, bringing justice to those who have been victimized by violence, and making sure that those that commit violence are not going to be able to commit violence against others in the future. This is a necessary, mindset that law enforcement does have a role. Protecting the public has a role, and that does require people who do have a use of force and good judgment of when to be able to use that, because there are people who are going to commit violence, and societies that are plagued by violence are not going to be able to economically prosper. This is very clear by the data. So we need to make sure that people feel comfortable to be able to invest into communities and not feel like they're going to have destruction occur from those investments, so they can't gain, some of the extra gratification that comes from being able to delay gratification and invest into the future. So yeah, I think that's very needed, that he has this focus on preventing violence still. And then he wants to provide meaningful oversight and accountability. He wants to give the Civilian Complaint Review Board final say on the disciplinary decisions. He wants to establish critical incident review board for all major incidents. He wants to bar officers who perpetuate major offenses. He wants to take action against police officers who cover their badges. He wants to create precinct level financial accountability. And he wants to dramatically increase transparency of the NYPD's budget, operations, and contracting, and introduce independent audits of its data and surveillance practices. So my only thing here is like, I kind of like this proposal that Yang had of just having the civilian commissioner position too, having like elected representation in an oversight position. That's the only thing that's like a real difference here. I'd like to see if Scott would adopt that as a platform item. Let's keep going. Implement common sense decriminalization measures and parole reform. He wants, for offenses that pose no threat to community safety, eliminate criminal penalties. Cool. Love it. What do you consider no threat to community safety, Scott? That's a little too vague. I'd like to hear the words, let's decriminalize sex work. Let's decriminalize drugs. Let's decriminalize gambling. Let's decriminalize all victimless crimes, basically. For low-level offenses, grant amnesty for open arrest warrants. That's great. I guess it's, again, like, we're gonna have to just see what he means by this. How how much of these low level or poses no threat to the community? I want a little bit more detail here, Scott, because these can be good. Very good, in fact. He wants to stop locking people up for unpaid court debt and technical parole violations. Agreed. Yeah, I think that is a very reasonable thing, as you have these other methods of determining flight risk. And I don't think we have to be locking up people for debt. That's just a way of criminalizing being poor. And I think he's absolutely right to not have those people be arrested. And then he wants to dramatically improve reentry services. Yeah, because we don't want people to stay in jail. Like, the whole purpose of jail, in my opinion, is, yes, you're trying to keep society safe until you can help reform individuals after they've committed crime. So it should be rehabilitative. And so you have to help people when they get out. And a lot of the times we make it really tough for people to get jobs when they get out, to become housed when they get out, because a lot of these things go on like their reports, and people will discriminate against them because it's on their reports. And they've served their time, and that's supposed to be a form of justice. And we're saying they're rehabilitated enough to re-enter society, but we make it really hard for people to come back, and that leads them into measures of desperation, and that often can potentially mean getting back involved in potentially gangs and other criminal organizations they might have been involved with beforehand. So we have to help get people back adjusted to society after they've served their time. Okay, next he says he wants to fix the management of the NYPD. He wants to substantially bring down overtime spending. Okay, that's actually a cool idea, because A, it's a cost-saving thing, but B, it's also like saying, like, let's stop overworking our cops so much. Like, they'll probably have better judgment, frankly, if they're not being completely overworked. So yeah, I think this works on a lot of levels. Maybe it means Scott might end up increasing the cop level from something like that, but I don't think that's a completely unfounded decision, both in a fiscal sense as well as in a clarity of judgment sense for officers. So that could be actually a subtly big policy. Next one, overhaul managerial training and promotion systems to promote diversity in the management. I don't know what that necessarily means. This is just incredibly vague. It's just to throw the word diversity. Potentially, it could be useful. I don't know. What does that mean, overhaul? Just he's going to do it. Okay, establish mechanism to receive feedback from both the community and frontline officers, and incorporate these surveys into the management and oversight of precincts. Okay, yeah. So he wants to have some method from the community to give feedback. Again, consider a civilian commissioner, Scott. That would be a great thing to do. But everyone, that is our stream today. We have done Scott Stringer. We're going to go and actually do tomorrow. We'll do Eric Adams. I'm going to be changing the titles of all these videos and such. So I just want to let you all know that detail. Please do let me know if at any point you all have any questions or have any suggestions for future videos. Please let us know if you have any topics you want to make us cover after we do the New York City race. And feel free to share these videos. We need to make sure that more people are aware of all the candidates in the race. And for the Yang Gang out there who are having Yang as their number one choice right now, I just want to let you all know, again, you all can make your own decisions. I will say for myself, Scott Stringer is going to be my number 2 for right now. That may change over time. I want these candidates to have to compete and consistently improve their policy platforms, but that is where he's at this moment. And so I'm glad we had this chat today. We will be back again at our normal time of 1 p.m. We only had some technical difficulties today. So I just wanted to let you all know we're going to be going back to our regular time at 1. What I was doing was trying to fix some of the equipment that we had here to make sure that we have better video quality going forward, and making sure when we had our internet go out that it was properly up and running. So thank you all again for being able to do this live stream with us all. One thing I want to see is if there's any final comments for us to be able to address, and then we'll depart for the day. So let's see. Our final comments coming from Dan. So Dan goes with, so you go by campaign financing status. So that'll be something we're going to probably do at another point in the future, is going through each of these candidates' campaign financing. I think it is a very important metric for people to be able to know who is financing these campaigns. One of the things that I like about Yang is he's very grassroots funded. One of the concerns I have about Scott is, despite this great housing platform we've all just seen, there are definitely developer campaign financiers in his mix. So that is one thing that concerns me. I think it's not going to be that's the final straw all the times, unless it's like clear, like I don't want to say, like, it's a clear corruption, like bribery, or it's like corporate PAC money. But like, if it's just a big donation from like one group to support a campaign and a regular donation from an individual, I don't see that as necessarily the biggest thing. But my metrics for usually choosing between these actual candidates is usually having it be based on a more policy level of certain policies that I have prioritized myself. So some of the things that he is currently lacking from his own campaign is he does not try to have anything in terms of a guaranteed minimum income proposal. Another thing Scott is missing from his own campaign page here is that he does not have a public banking proposal. There are different policies that I think are very important. And then after we go on a policy level, the next thing that I really try and look at with these people is that they have, a campaign financing system in their own campaigns that is clean. They take money directly from usually predominantly small dollar donors, but they can have some large dollar donors, but that they are not actually having any corporate PAC money as real sources of funding for their campaigns. So that is really what we try to focus on when we are doing the evaluation. So thank you all for coming into today's live stream. We appreciate you all taking the time today. Again, check us out on social media at People's Basics. We are at that on Facebook, Twitter. We're on Instagram. And our website still for the time being is thehillofroses.com. We'll be at thepeoplesbasics.com come March. Thank you all for tuning in today, and we will talk to you all later. Okay, bye guys.